Alright, this is W. Bush, simply Walker Bush, Little Bush, or whatever you say. This is the one, so, these are going to be his domestic. Now, his other one, War on Terror, I combine some foreign aspects, but there's a lot of stuff to get here, so let's go. The election of 2000 is possibly one of the craziest elections in U.S. history. It is wildly crazy. Now, who's running? We have a man named Ralph Nader, who's a third-party candidate. The same Ralph Nader wrote Unsafe News Feed about this. George W. Bush will be the Republican running, and Al Gore, who had been the sitting vice president under Clinton, will be running as a Democrat. Okay? Now, what happens next is nothing short of just plain out crazy. On election night, the ballot votes are coming in, and people are watching this, and the last state, or one of the last states to really report, is Florida. And so once Florida has reported, Al Gore concedes. Now, this is a show, the way our politics works. The opposing candidate will concede the election. This is basically like, thank you for a good thing. This is kind of like a handshake at the end of a sporting event, okay? Good game, guys. However, in a couple of hours, Gore comes back and rescinds his conceding the election and says, no, the election's back on. Why is this happening, and how is it ultimately resolved? Gore's camp in Florida said there had been voter confusion. People were not sure about who they voted for, and there could have been some malfunction. The ballot had two lines, okay? So the first line up here said Bush and Cheney, all right? And there was an arrow went over here. Beneath that, it said Gore and Lieberman was the guy's name, and there was an arrow here. Now, that arrow, even though it was the second one, was the third one you had to punch. The second actually went to Mr. Pat Buchanan on the other side. So, if you go, okay, second name, second bullet, voter confusion, you're voting for who you not want, etc. Now, I know that's a simple case of follow the arrow, but do we always follow all the directions we are given? I'm going to let you think about that for a minute. Think amongst yourselves. No. So, Gore's camp comes back, and in addition, there was another thing, sorry. When you punch through those, they weren't filling the bubble, they punched through. When you punch through, the back side of that has a little tab, and that tab is called a chad. Now, some of the times these chads didn't fall off, so that's called a hanging chad. And Gore's camp seemed to think that when the hanging chad went through these automatic vote counters, it didn't count them. And so what he wants is a recount in Florida. So they give him a recount, another man, feed him through the machine again. He goes, no. The machines didn't read them right. We want a manual recount. We're talking millions of votes, and we're getting close to where we have to have a president announced. I mean, we're getting close to January. We have to have somebody to inaugurate, okay? So what happens here is it is settled in the Supreme Court. George Bush will take Al Gore to court over not conceding the election, keeping the election open due to a recount. What they decide, and you can see it there, the U.S. Supreme Court rejects a Florida recount. Now, is it because they don't like this? Is it because there's a scandal? No, it's because of the 20th Amendment. 20th Amendment says that the president has to take office that third week in January. So if we go and do this hand recount, we're not going to have a president until like March, okay? So they said it's not feasible. With this in mind, Gore will finally concede the election, and Bush is pronounced the winner. But again, that's a very chaotic thing to go through, correct? I know, it just seems odd. Now, what has Al Gore done in the meantime? Al Gore in 2005 will produce a movie called An Inconvenient Truth. An Inconvenient Truth is going to become kind of the Bible, if you will, of global warming. What we should and shouldn't be doing to save the planet. And it's actually garnered a lot of steam. There's a lot of, no pun intended there for garnering steam, sorry. a lot of countries have jumped on board with this global warming idea, and Al Gore really was the one to kind of make his case. Now, Ralph Nader, as I mentioned, is a third-party candidate. He's called a Green Party, and so we have, again, the third party. Now, 2016, at this point, you now know it's Hillary Clinton who's going to be running as Democratic and Donald Trump as Republican. Looks that way. There are third-party candidates. One of the biggest one getting names and getting support right now is a governor of New Mexico named Gary Johnson, who is a libertarian. So there are other options for president outside of just the Democrat and Republican. Now, Bush is going to announce a sweeping educational reform called No Child Left Behind. This is the first time we hear the words IEP, Individualized Educational Plan, for special educational students. And this is the first time an IEP is going to mean to include not only severe mental handicaps, but minor ones such as attention deficit disorder, as well as some other severe ones that have come up in late of autism and Asperger's. So, No Child Left Behind gives us IEPs. It also gives us the plethora of state tests and standardized tests and testing that you know today. Is Bush the one who created this? No, that would be Johnson. Is he the one that kind of put it in the fast lane? Absolutely. Recently, President Obama actually repealed No Child Left Behind and kind of gave his version called Every Student Succeeds. Still state tests, things like that, but it does cut down kind of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not the rigor, but kind of the one chance opportunity at a state test, and gives other options. Now, Bush actually believed in something called compassionate conservatism. Okay, so how does this compassionate conservatism work? Well, we have the case of a soldier, and the soldier is wounded, and so the military, through VA benefits, cannot produce this, and so the hope is there would be kind of non-profit organizations that would help pay this man's medical bills. What we have seen, though, however, is a lot of soldiers are not getting the care they need, and a lot of them end up homeless and with PTSD, and the suicide rate of war veterans is actually much, much higher. And that's a scary thought, because these are people serving the country, and for some reason we can't take care of them. But again, it's the idea that the community should care for its own before asking for the federal government. Again, conservatism at its finest. Now, also, in the early 2000s, we have what is called the Beltway sniper. Now, singular sniper, but it was actually two people. These people drove around a car in Washington, D.C. You can see one is older, one is, I think he was 16, 17 at the time. And they killed a significant amount of people in a few short weeks, maybe a month. And they were actually shooting out of the trunk of a car, and it was all kinds of chaos because everyone is now panicking. Now, the reason I bring it up is this. When this popped up on the news scene, the news one night decided to say a white panel van was seen at the crime. So these guys made sure that every place they shot at had a white panel van. And so again, this is now showing us that the media access we have now with the internet can be a damaging thing. Twitter and social media and throwing your opinion out there, bar none, right at the start, can be a damaging thing. We've got to protect and find out all the sources before we give our opinion. Otherwise, we tend to look kind of silly if we're wrong. Now, election of 2004, again, Nader's in here, but it comes down to these two people. George W. Bush will run for re-election against John Kerry, who currently is our Secretary of State, meaning our head diplomat with us and other countries. Bush will win. Now, also, here around 2005, we have eminent domain come into play. Now, eminent domain says you can't take private property for public use without properly paying somebody. And no better example of this was Kelo versus New London. Miss Kelo owned a little pink house. It's called the Little Pink House debate for short. New London wants to build another super highway to connect. This is in Connecticut, by the way, if you've ever been there, not England. So To build this, they would need to build an off-ramp or an on-ramp, I can't remember which one, and it would have to go right through Miss Kilo's house. So they went to him and said, we're prepared to give you money, state of Connecticut, to build this. And she says, no, don't want to do it. So how is it ultimately decided? The increased taxes would have directed public benefit. Therefore, there is a but. If you've ever been to an English class and they go, the rule is I before E, and then the rest of this thing is except after C. There's always a excuse to go against these things. So they ultimately decide here that she has to sell her house because the public good would be benefited more by this highway, and she has to sell. I know, I'm sorry. Now, 2005 gives us a horrible natural disaster, which is made even worse by insufficient government response. New Orleans is hit by Hurricane Katrina. Guys, hurricanes hit the coast all the time. They have hurricane parties. That's not that big of a deal. The big deal is, if you've ever been to New Orleans, it's a bowl. Okay? In fact, they bury the people on top of the ground because they're afraid they're going to float away. I'm not making that up. If you've seen Hurricane Katrina, you know what I'm talking about. Some of these caskets floated out. Anywho, the big fear was Hurricane Katrina would damage the levees on either side. And so what would happen is that as they would come down, New Orleans would flood. And at the bottom of this bowl is the poorest of the poor of New Orleans. Okay? So Hurricane Katrina hits. A few days later, the levees do break, and New Orleans is flooded. Okay? Millions of people are affected at this point. And so what happens is the U.S. Department to help out here of Homeland Security is called FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. FEMA, number one, was slow to respond. Number two, they didn't have the right information on what to do here. And number three, they didn't have enough money to provide for these people. And so a lot of backlash has been had at FEMA and government kind of responses to natural disasters since FEMA. In 2007, we will have the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act, aka the DREAM Act. Okay, this is going to basically enforce people coming to this country, while at the same time saying if you serve in the military, we can give you a backlash and you can be considered a citizen. And that's still a big thing for debate. Immigration has been a big topic. When the presidential debates start happening, expect immigration will be a major topic. Ms. Clinton, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Trump, what are you going to do about immigration? That's going to be a big topic, okay? Now also here, under George Bush, he will introduce what is called TARP, okay? TARP stands for Troubled Assets Relief Program. Basically, if a company is failing, the federal government will step in, act as kind of an overseer for a little while, and then send them back out. Now, Bush kind of creates it. Obama uses it a ton in 2008, and we'll see how that works. Now, the next video about Bush is about the war on terror.